Yeah.
Okay, so I started the recording. We are here today for the Wild Bill Swim and Paddle Challenge. I'm talking to Jessi, and Jessi is a very accomplished open water swimmer. She's here in Vancouver. She's done all kinds of things in Howe Sound. I will post her video along with this, her her bio along with this interview. And today we are here to talk about a specific swim she did last year in, is it called the North Channel swim? Is that
Yeah.
what it's called? Yeah, it's between Scotland and Ireland. No, you went from Ireland to Scotland,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about how she prepared, what some of her challenges were, and we'll just see what happens in our conversation. So so Jessi, can you maybe, before we even start with that, maybe you could just talk to us about how did you get started in open water swimming and when was that?
Yeah. So like a lot of people, I sort of, because I turned 40 last year. I'm okay with saying that. So about almost 8 years ago, I was in Australia with just broke up with my ex-partner, and I had heard about like triathlon and endurance sports, and I had done a lot of cycling and running just for fun. And I synchronized swam when I was a kid. So I was pretty comfortable in the water. I hadn't touched the water in almost 15 years really for swimming. Like I was living in Australia and I didn't swim at all. And it was just something that it wasn't on my radar anymore. But when I broke up with my ex and I started having to meet more people because I was, somewhere, I've traveled alone before, but it was kind of an awkward situation. So I decided to join a triathlon club out in Brisbane, and I started swimming. I remember my first time I got back in the water again, and I started swimming, running, and cycling, and it was all great. Moved back to Vancouver a couple months after that. That was after a 3-4 year stint in Brisbane. And I started with a triathlon group, Leading Edge Tri Club. That was my club, and had all the wrong gear and just showed up, started cycling, getting some better gear, nothing major. Started having IT band issues. So they thought it was like running repetitive stress on my right hip. And soon after that, I got diagnosed with a degenerative hip condition and a hip impingement that is also degenerative, that doesn't really qualify for surgery. So I've said this before, but I basically walked out of the UBC sports med office, and I remember thinking, because I asked him, I was like, well, can I do ironman, can I do triathlon, can I do all this other stuff? And he's like, no. He's like, that's not on your radar anymore, because I was getting issues just cycling. Not all hip conditions have issues with cycling, but I was just having all these problems, repetitive stress issues. And I said, and at that point, I hadn't been able to run or bike for a few months, for about 6-7 months. And I had gone sort of a little reverse. I'd found Swim Trek. Like I don't work for them. I don't promote them, but man, I went to a swim camp with them because they were the most reasonably priced swim camp, because I wanted to swim across the bay. Right. And I knew I couldn't run and bike, but I hadn't gotten my degenerative hip condition diagnosis yet. And I showed up in Mallorca with my wetsuit to the likes of people like Kevin Murphy, who swam the English Channel like 32 times, and Fiona Southwell, and she's another great coach, and Rebecca Lewis, who I think she still holds the British female record. But I showed up to the swim camp with all these amazing people, and and I was just in a wetsuit, and there's 16 of us. I think 4 of us were in wetsuits. The rest of people were not, because back then this was about 6-7 years ago, they had advertised these swim camps from a 10K to a channel swim. So I was just going to do a 10K, showed up in my wetsuit, got exposed to all this information. And it just, even before my hip diagnosis, it just started opening my world to all these amazing possibilities of swimming everywhere. It really was a bit of a head explosion, and came back to Vancouver and got the hip diagnosis. And within literally 3 or 4 weeks, I had started kayaking. My dad started kayaking with me, and I was swimming next to him. And when I walked out of this doctor's office and they're like, you can't do an Ironman, I'm like, Jesus, now I got to swim the English Channel. Like, it was like, really? Like, either, because that was like the other thing. I was like, if I'd just been to the swim camp, But these people are like, oh, the English Channel, the English Channel. And I was like, I was looking at people like, why would, like, the way they talked about it, it was like, why would you put yourself through so much misery to swim across a body of water? So, and literally, like, I think I did a 9 or 10 hour swim by accident.
By accident?
My dad hit current, and I don't ever recommend anyone doing that because I got a little injured. But basically, when I realized, because at the swim camp, I hadn't swam more than 4 or 5 hours. Like, I'd never done more than 2 hours before I got there. And they're like, oh, yeah, just, yeah, in your wetsuit. Yeah, try another third, fourth hour. Have food, keep going. And their attitude and the way, just the jovial way of British Black humor of, you can cry, you can swear, but do you just want to, or you can be sick, have a puke, and then, you want some more water?
Yeah.
Here's some water. Here, you want to keep going or you want to stop?
Yeah. No coddling.
I connected with, of like, they weren't angry that I wasn't going fast enough. They weren't this, they weren't that. They were just like, okay, yeah, you got to keep going. Let's try tomorrow. Let's try. And I started really enjoying it. Like, the water was so salty in Mallorca, and it just made you so ill so fast. So that was sort of how I came to it. And then within 4 months of even my first long swim with my dad, I did my first 6-hour English Channel qualifier. And I had decided, I had to book years in advance. And I said, I got to do one swim. I got to swim the Georgia Strait before I go and swim the English Channel. Yeah. So that kind of spurred it on. And the next year I went back to Mallorca with my father this time, and he listened to all of it. Cause I was like, if I'm going to do this in Vancouver, I know I'm going to be looked at a bit awkward, but I got to, get some support. And my dad was the kayak support. And cause that's actually what Rebecca Lewis, who was my age and still is at the time, her dad supported her, and she was in her 30s and had her parents support her. So I was like, well, then I can't be like the only one. So, okay. And the next year I went back with Rebecca Lewis. Her dad and my dad were both in these coves watching us. And it was like, it worked. It completely worked. And after you learned everything and then came back to Vancouver again, that was a year later, swam the Georgia Strait and kind of just kept going from there, and got through the English Channel. And, I've had a lot of ups and downs, but that's sort of how it all got started, was figuring out the team first almost.
Well, yeah. And I think that it's so important that you identified with a group of people that made it fun, right? Because they were so experienced that they're like, yeah, well, all this shit can happen. That's the reality. But that's the reality. So let's just make it light. And that's just how they identified with it. And that's probably what kept you so involved, because you love the people too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I really felt it was a very safe, like, space for your mental health, and you could talk about things, and it was like a bit of a therapy class. I didn't realize how cathartic it would be, just to be able to experience such misery and disgust, but to be able to get through it. And a lot of it was just in your head. You were just swimming loops in a bay, like it was water swimming, but it wasn't, but the wind picked up and there's jellyfish and all these little things that happen in small little bays, quite safe. Safety being the key, because I don't go and swim there alone. I don't go swim around freighters. You don't need to. I swim shorelines.
Right. Exactly.
For training, because I don't have an expensive boat, and you can do the training that way. So when I realized I could do the training, it was just whether or not if I could do enough pool time and get some technical, enough technical help, and to figure out if I could do this with not a very strong kick. And being in the ocean with flotation, I've quickly learned that most people, even good swimmers, they learn the muscle memory, but you don't have to kick much in the ocean, because you kick down and your leg floats back up again. But it's having the foundations of kick for a balanced stroke and all those foundations that and now I almost wish I had been a college swimmer, or a, high school swimmer, but I did synchro, so I can scull forever.
Yeah. But so before we go on to your training for the North Crossing, maybe you can talk a little bit, since it is like the end of the winter season, about when do you do your pool time? How much pool time do you do? Why is that important in off season?
So it really depends year to year for me, because also I now work in aquatics as well. And I do always recommend people joining like local masters clubs, but it hasn't always worked out working in hospitality and now aquatics. So I've always mostly trained alone. I mean, when I go out in the ocean, I'm always with somebody, a spotter or a kayaker. But in terms of my program, it's all tapered to me, which a lot of people have to do, or some people mix it up between masters to keep them sane and then doing some of their own training. So I try and spend 2 to 3 months a year, if not more than that, on technical fixing, because your foundations are in the pool. The ocean has currents and waves, and even lakes, any kind of open water. You're cranking your neck in different directions when you're sighting. So getting those foundations in the pool every year is really, really important. And even for me now, I even try and even swim a little bit throughout even the summer when it's warm enough outside. I still try and do some pool swimming, because that is the foundation that you're going to need. But anybody, even the Sarah Thomases or the Cameron Bellamy's, the famous people, they all have to do lots and lots of pool work. And most of it usually happens in the wintertime. But in terms of getting into the open water in that structure, it just depends on the year, because I have progressively gotten into colder water, which was colder and colder and colder training. So my seasons do change, but in Vancouver, our water increases very fast in May, almost always in May now. So it's weird. We don't really have a saddle season, and I prefer. Yeah. So anyways, your whole training schedule really depends on what type of water you have access to, and what you're training for. But again, the pool foundations, more important than you will ever know. Getting your foundations and then working with pace training. And then a lot of this is not using fancy watches, nothing. It's because when you do a channel swim, you can't have a fancy watch. You can have a basic one that tells you what time it is. You're not allowed any of this stuff. So you really have to learn about pacing and feel of the water. And if you're going to do like fartlek training, like in different intensities, you really have to learn how to feel that and what it feels like. So practicing that in the pool and in the ocean, super important, to know what you got when they say, after you've been swimming for 15 hours and they're like, okay, the tide's going to change. You need to see if you can push through it. How much can you get? How fast can you go for the next 40 minutes?
Yeah.
And you're like, what do you mean by fast? I am going fast. I'm swimming for 15 hours. I can't go any faster. So
yeah. Well, I love that you talk about being able to feel your pace and feel the water, because I think so many times that we depend on those objects or a coach or a clock on the wall to say, I did that. I'm doing 50s on 1 minute. And you just keep doing it like it's like rote, it's like robotic. But that feeling in the water is really important when you're in open water, for sure. I love that you talk about that. Does that change for you when you're in very cold water?
What do you mean by change?
Well, because the pool is a very controlled environment. And when you get into cold water, sensations are different, right? After a while, you don't feel your hands the same way. Your mental capacity gets, after a while, it changes also. Right.
Yeah.
So
I get there's good and bad things. Like I do find I will, if it's within a certain range, I actually stay moving. I'm more consistent in the ocean. Like I don't start and stop if the water's cold enough. If it gets too warm, that's when I get a bit la-di-da, but I can focus. But I do find that when it's that cold, you can't stop for very long. Even if you're going into shore, let's say you don't have your kayaker and you're swimming just back and forth in a bay and you're going to shore to grab your food, you're going to get cold so fast that you really just got to eat really quick and get back and get going. Mm-hmm. So I like that feeling. I've learned that that's a feeling of comfort for me now. It took me a really long time to get to that place where I actually enjoy that feeling. Where I can't necessarily feel my body, but I know like all of a sudden, sometimes my stroke rate will increase because I'm getting cold. It's part of my thermal regulation, which I'm not saying I know what's going on, because I know there's a lot of things we cannot control, especially as your body cools. So I'm not going to pretend. I know it's almost the more acclimated you are, you can almost be at higher risk, mm-hmm. because you don't know when you're getting cold because you're so used to it. Mm-hmm. So that's a danger. That's a whole another topic of a danger in itself. Yeah. But I do find in the ocean, because I have access to water most times of the year. Like I don't go a ton in the winter, depending on the year, depending if I'm doing ice miles or not, ice mile training, because I am somebody who kind of needs a reason for it. I do believe it is very good for your mental health, but I need a reason to be out there. Like I'm going up and helping out with some herring surveys now. I need a reason to be out there to get in the water, on top of me just loving it. So yeah, there's a few different things that happen. So that's one thing. I mean, I do notice that I do kind of get a little more complacent with my pace, where I breathe like in the pool, I'm single side breather almost all the time, especially when I'm sprinting, automatically ocean bilateral. Like my bad shoulder doesn't hurt as much. So my rotation's a bit easier in some respects.
Yeah.
But again, you got to check yourself because I always develop bad habits every year in the ocean, and that's why there's pool as well. But so the feeling of the sensation from the pool to the ocean, things have evolved from year to year for me in terms of that. But it's really about your mindset, and you can't also understand you can't change. You can also only so much you can control of your mind anyways. And your attitude will adjust year to year depending on what your goals are, if you still want to push to love it.
Right.
Because there are times when I do not love it. A lot of times I want to go out.
That's what makes great swimmers or great athletes, is the times that you're still there when you don't really want to be there. We all have that time, right?
That's why I love the ocean, though. Is just things change. Like I'm not very acclimated right now, but it's, I see the importance of all the different types of training that is involved in the swimming, because it takes a lot of time putting those times aside, because when you're going into cold water, you're spending a lot of time rewarming. It's not just get in, get out. You have to plan your day around it sometimes, because it can also drain all your energy off of you, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay, so maybe we could talk about how you prepared for the North Channel crossing. So let's start with when did you consciously start training for it? Like, was it a year before, 6 months before?
Well, we had planned it for 2022, but because of COVID, everything got delayed. Right.
It was 2022.
No, for 2021. Sorry. This is 2023. We had planned it for 2021. Then we delayed it a year because I was first off the tide in August of 2021. And then I ended up getting second. I got a different slot, but similar time of year. And so I had done some swims in Howe Sound in 2022. We finished off, I was doing kind of a Howe Sound series where I wanted to circumnavigate all the islands, and I did Gambier that year. But like the Salish Sea likes to do, I tried to plan a swim in early June thinking it was going to be cold compared to the North Channel, and the water shot up literally in June, early June. It was like a week. It went from 14 to 16 or 13 to 16. It was, sorry, that's Celsius.
That's okay. I was just going to remind people that was Celsius. So
within 10 days.
Yeah.
And what happens? Our water flips really fast with the water that's coming down from the rivers. And if the water's warm, it creates that warm surface layer. So I thought I had tried to do swims in 2021. Yeah. Some of them were cold. I did my first 10. I did 2 10Ks at around 11 degrees, and that was tough. So it's just above 50. And those, they were just more lessons of how to fight current, and how a 10K that normally would take me 3.5 hours turns into a 5.5 hour swim very fast. So,
what temperature were you expecting the North Channel to be?
I was expecting it to be between 11 and 13. So 52 to 58 at the highest, maybe 52 to 55. That's what we were expecting. And to do a qualifier, it's 6 hours at around, it's 13. So I think it was supposed to be 6 hours at 54, 52, 54-ish. And so we were training in that. I went to Sasamat. I realized that Sasamat actually stays colder. It gets a little warmer than the ocean, and then it flips the other way. So it gets a little warmer and then the ocean gets warmer, and then Sasamat will get warmer again. It'll go back and forth for some of these lakes, depending. So we actually found Sasamat was 12 degrees in May, early May, January, March, April-ish. So we started doing, like, I did a 6-hour swim at Sasamat.
Oh, wow,
so
that's a lot of loops.
which made me, I was like, I know the Canada Day route now for Vauza. I know it really well.
Exactly.
I swam before, but I hadn't done it in so long.
Right.
Sorry, this being outside of Vancouver, sorry.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
But it was great. It was actually really good time because we could actually time the 2-kilometer triangles.
Right.
And I was trying, I could keep my pace up. My body was really getting cold, could I try and keep that pace up? It wasn't exactly scientific, but we were pretty much, I didn't slow down too much, even though I felt, if anything, it makes you even more tired, but it's good. It was a good push. So I did things like that, like where I kept training. I did a 6-hour, 7 hours down in the Juan de Fuca down in Victoria. We did 7 hours at 11.
Okay.
That was our peak training. So that's what we expected.
And that was what, along the coast, or do you do like a loop, and you did it with some other people, or what was that?
No, most of my training swims is just my dad. We do shoreline swims. We usually pick spots that we sort of know. We don't know the Juan de Fuca as well. So we decided just to go in and out of a few bays, and then we'd go like a there and back, but go back early, depending on the tides, especially because the tides out there can be really weird. So we just went back early, and then we zigzagged burn time, because we do it by hours. We train by hours, not by kilometers. Right. Because again, even in Vancouver, the counter current can be so, you think you're swimming with the tide, and you're actually swimming against it because of the current.
Right.
So it's really hard. It's really hard because even Jericho or Kitsilano Beach, there's no current unless if you go to Sasamat, yes. If you go to or Bunsen has a little bit of a current, you have to go to current neutral lake if you really want to know what your pace is in open water.
Right.
So that's how we did that stuff. But after June here, we couldn't get, the water was 15, 16 degrees. It was too much. It was it's English Channel training.
Yeah. So
then after the end of June now, it gets warmer than that. You almost can't, an English Channel qualifier is 6 hours at 16 degrees. So 60. And after the end of June, you can barely get that here anymore. Same in Dover. It gets too warm.
Oh, wow. Huh.
The English Channel was up to 21 degrees this summer.
Really?
Because when I went to Ireland, the heat wave started, and they decided that the water was not below 14.
So you were overprepared.
15, because Sarah Thomas had just done her world record double North Channel at 11 degrees in early July, early July. So. And I always make a joke that she warmed it up for the rest of us because it went warm fast.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it when we showed up. We showed up and went down to Kinsale, and it was 14 degrees. And I was like, I was almost disappointed.
It's like, I've trained for 11.
Give me some 11 degrees.
Yeah.
But
so tell me how does it go logistically? So you leave here, a couple weeks before your slot time, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm fortunate enough, I might not make as much money as other people do, but I'm fortunate enough where I actually allow more time. Some people try and do it in their 2-week holiday, and it's tough because you want to arrive a little bit before and have a little bit of time after. If you get delayed, different channel swimming associations have different rules about the amount of swimmers on a tide or how to push them. There's different things, but to do it on 2 weeks is tough. It's tough. I believe you need we usually turn these trips into traveling trips because I go with my dad, and we both, I hadn't been to Ireland since I'd gone to university out in England when I was in my 20s. And I traveled to some of these countries, but I never really explored them. Yeah. So we turned it into a vacation. So we decided to go for 20. I think this was the shortest one we did. We did 21 days. English Channel, we sort of left almost too much time, but we try to show up. We try to show up about 10 days before and leave a week after. I've also learned that it might be great to leave extra time after, but you're dead tired after. You don't want to do anything after. After I just right. I just want to laze around and talk to my catch up on social media for a couple of days. And I usually just end up wanting to go. I go down to the beach again because that's where I want to be. Right. But I'm so tired I can't. You get in the water and you feel like you're going to sink to the bottom every time you get in the water for the first week or so.
Yeah. And if
It's
I
so great.
remember, and this is a great example of the swimming community around the world, is that you stayed with Neil, right? Not Neil, the American guy who lives in Ireland. I interviewed him too, and now I can't remember his name. Didn't you stay with him when you first got to Ireland?
Oh, I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know if he wants anyone knowing who I
Oh,
stayed
I talked about that with him before. So yeah, anyway.
Oh, okay. Oh, so
Yeah.
Ned
But I just
Denton?
find it very gracious that the open water community just they will do what they need to do to help people get to where they need to go and do what they need to do, right?
Well,
That's
I've been very fortunate though. Like I've been very fortunate. Like I even got to, I don't know if you know who Marilyn Bell is.
I don't know.
She was the first person to swim Lake Ontario in the 30s.
Okay.
But I got to her daughter. There, she married an American lifeguard. Her, she's yeah, like Canadian, historical Canadian icon of open water swimming. And I actually got to meet her daughter Jody Delasco, because her husband was Delasco, so Marilyn Bell Delasco. Marilyn Bell found me on the internet after I swam the English Channel, and I met her when I was down in California, and her daughter observed my Catalina crossing. Her daughter's not a marathon swimmer, but she is an observer for the Catalina Swimming Federation. So it was just a sign of our extended. We've been very lucky. We don't take for granted the kindness of strangers. We've met so many kind people, including Ned, and just lots of amazing people that we're very fortunate, and we're just trying to pay it forward to other people. That's why I volunteer for Vancouver Open Water Swimming Organization. I enjoy setting up small races. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff at the beach, trying to encourage more people. I don't care if you wear a wetsuit or not. If you're the wetsuit, the no wetsuit, you have to come to that on your own terms.
Right. Exactly.
You have to do that for yourself. There's pros and cons of both. I am a complete convert, but that's just me. And I only expect people to do what they think is right for them. And I can help give people the tools and encourage people, but I don't force anyone to do anything. It's just, but that's the thing, is the kindness of strangers around the world have been really, been very fortunate, because when I did get to Ireland, I did actually end up getting COVID before my swim. So.
Oh, that's what I heard from some of the Vauza swimmers. That's right. That's what they had mentioned.
I did write it. When I got my awards, I finally published. I did write on my personal account, and I did talk about it. I just didn't want that to be the focus of it, because some other swimmers did get COVID and they had to go home. English Channel and North Channel. It happens last couple of years. They can't do it. And I don't know what happened to me, because the water was warm. I was coughing less in the water, and I was still testing positive up to a few days before my swim, but they let me go as long as I wore a mask. When I got on the boat, they said it was okay.
Right.
So we went for it.
It's not like, you were in the water. You're not near any other humans.
No, but if a medical attention, if something happens, people, but we were already past I had gotten symptoms right when I showed up, and I isolated for the Irish. I think it was less than 10 days, the Irish.
It was like 8 days is what I'm thinking. But
we did whatever the Irish standard was.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I had made a joke that I had allowed 10 days, enough time in case one of us got COVID on the airplane or something. I had allowed enough time. I didn't expect it to actually be implemented like that. I would be panicking over this.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine all the preparation and not knowing if you would come out the other side of being ill and able to swim. That's the thing, right?
But I also got a
slot and still have your team. There's a lot of factors that go together. Yeah.
But I had also gotten a severe flu cold right before I swam the English Channel as well.
Maybe
because I got delayed a week.
It's
I got delayed a week, and that one's not uncommon though. I heard of other people that had gotten severe, because you're tapering down, waiting, and then your body crashes while you're waiting for tides and weather. So I got purposely, there was a big delay, like because of weather. It was delayed a week, and in that week I got massively sick. We were camping in a tent, and I had a fever of 100 and whatever, and that was nuts as well. So I hate to say it, but a lot of these things I'd been through in different forms, and my COVID was actually not that. It was bad, but it seemed to be I felt like I'd felt worse before because
Yeah.
because I had my vaccines, and I thank God for vaccines, you know.
Yeah. Well, and everyone gets a different version of it based on their own immune system and their own condition in that moment. So, we can never tell. But yeah, that's great. And I'm glad we brought up the community and Ned and all that, because when I did interview him, his whole focus was on, once you do some swims, get back out and volunteer, find a place to be on a boat, kayak, help a race and the people racing in any way you can. So that was actually the whole focus of our talk. So
yeah, and I hardcore believe in that. I've never raised a lot of money for swims, and it is part of my future, and I do believe that's important, but giving back your time, I think, is just as important, because this is what, like, I would love, and I love mentoring, and I've helped other people a little bit, and that's what I really enjoy doing. You just have to be very careful about safety and people's expectations.
Oh, of course.
Because I had some pretty good, and I had lots and lots of amazing mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people I met either in person, whether it was before or after. Mm-hmm. I just didn't, put something on a Facebook post asking for help. I actually went out there and talked to people and emailed them and, mm-hmm. called them. And when we went traveling, I would go and see people. When I was in New York, I got to meet Caroline Block, who was the only person who swam it like 4 times now. I can't remember how many times. I asked her before I even booked my slot. I was, I was like, well, if one person's going to know, it's got to be Caroline Block, because she swam it more than anybody. And she had different theories on her, because she had attempted doubles many times. Mm-hmm. And it was talking to these people, and most people, based on all the swims and accidental countercurrents I've encountered in the Salish Sea, most of them saw me with my training, and they were so supportive because they knew I was trying.
Right.
They knew I was putting myself out there. I was doing what I could do, without, again, everyone has their own budgets, but using the resources I had to go and put myself in uncomfortable but safe situations.
Yeah. And I think that's key to what you just said, is that well, we talk about safety in all situations, but also competitive swimming, at least as children, has become, you have to have the money to join the clubs. And it's really, it hurts me because it's so expensive to be a competitive swimmer nowadays, but it's not to be an open water swimmer if you are resourceful, because there's not a lot of gear, that takes a lot of effort. And then where you choose to do your swims is a different discussion, than travel expenses and all of that. But where there's a will, there's a way. As long as
but it does take people, though. It does take cost. It does take people, because you really shouldn't be going out there swimming by yourself. I mean, swimming back and forth in a bay, I think, is the most I'd ever do by myself. But you shouldn't be. It's not like a run. People go for a hike by themselves. People go for a quick run. Ultra runners and stuff. You can't really do that with swimming. You kind of need to have someone, or need your stuff at. If you're doing long swims, you need to stay hydrated, having your nutrition. You can't really go out there. I don't encourage people to go out there by themselves. Yeah, it's just too many.
What do you like? How long do you think you can swim without having hydration or food? Like, if it's not cold water, let's not talk cold water. Let's talk.
It doesn't matter. You're sweating. It doesn't matter. I won't go more. I'm fussy. I don't go more than an hour and a half without. Like, I would never do it. Sometimes I'll go out and bring my stuff, like put some bottles, clip them onto my tow float. Yeah. I've done that, but I'll never go more than an hour without hydration. It's just not a smart thing to do. Right. I don't believe in it. Or even in San Francisco, sometimes they slip a bottle down their swimsuit if they're just going to swim around the bay.
Oh yeah. I've got a good friend who swims in one of the clubs in San Francisco Bay. He says, I always have my electrolytes with me, and he swims in a Speedo, right? Just the old fashioned version. I'm like, where do you put it? Where do you think I put it?
Yeah, I don't know though. I get chafed so easily. I'm just like, I've slept a gel pack in my swimsuit, but I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. I know the girls in San Francisco, they'll clip their cameras and throw them down their bras.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff do you use as snacks when you're swimming, or in between?
I stay away from the carb mixes, because I found they made me sick. I mean, every couple of years, I think I should reevaluate, but I stick with goo gels. Seem to be pretty much my fail-safe. over the years. Like I remember even English Channel had multiple like different brands, and I've tried different things over the years. But goo with pre-mix it in hot water, warm water, and I always have a bit of bread with peanut butter. I do these little peanut butter and jam rolls, and when I'm training, sometimes I'll have like cinnamon buns or muffin or something, but I have some gut issues, and I just find having a little bit of something in my stomach keeps me satisfied. And actually, if I am then sick, there's something for me to be sick. If I have nothing in there and I'm gonna dry heave, that hurts.
Yeah.
That's what I've found for my sickness, that I'd rather have a full stomach. I might not be swimming, like I'm not sprinting out there, but I'd rather have a full stomach. And that's different for everybody. That's the one thing I've learned. Everybody is so different. Because I remember even when we were doing the North Channel, and I was pretty confident with what we had, but we had Teresa Seibel was one of my friends who came. She's actually first time we ever had someone from Canada come with us who wasn't just me and my dad, and not on the boat, but just traveling. And she's like, "Oh, are you sure you don't want? You usually have more stuff." Or she's like, "What if you change your mind?" And guess what? I decided to bring mini muffins, and I brought my peanut butter and jam. Guess what? I ended up with peanut butter and jam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so it was.
That's what, as people start to swim more, that's an area where there's less. If you don't swim with a group of experienced swimmers, like the groups in San Francisco Bay, they all have been doing this for so long. They have different things that they like. Like a friend of mine likes little almond butter pouches or peanut butter pouches, or everybody's got their little thing. So
and just because somebody else does it, like a lot of it, again, this is like survival swimming. Like, yes, you need your calories. Yes, you need this, but a lot of the times you'll be sick. It'll come up, but you just got to keep taking in the water. As long as you're urinating, and that's happening, you can get across a channel on something else.
Yeah. And I think that if you were going to choose between calories and electrolytes, I'm guessing electrolytes are more important.
Not necessarily with open water. Salts, even salts.
Interesting.
You can get electrolyte overload. Okay. You're absorbing salt through your nose and mouth, and you can get it, or you can get overload. I would normally, from what I've been told, electrolytes tend to be more important when you're swimming in fresh water. Salt water, you need to make sure you're drinking. You need to balance that salt with water.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Yeah.
So I have gone off on the end of swims where because after about 16 hours of gels, usually I'm done, because I do take quite a lot. I sometimes feel like I should have a little less, but usually the last couple of hours I've done Coke, like flat Coke. That's been a big one that saves people. I'll do it more frequently because maltodextrin in the gels it releases the sugar slowly through your bloodstream. So if I'm going to have fructose, like flat Coke, I'll have like a chug of it every 20 minutes. So more frequent, so you don't get that bonk. But that's what worked for me in the past. And if you can't take that, just fresh water. The fresh water, that's going to get you through. Electrolytes are important, but I just think it's overly stressed sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I guess for some of the people watching this, most of them are in some way involved with the swim that I run in August, and that's in a lake. So,
it's a little different. You get sick in a lake. There's so many different factors. And this is English Channel, and they haven't done enough salt lake swims. They can swim a 30-mile lake, but they haven't done enough saltwater swims because it's very different on your body.
It's different.
Shoulder, but
you can say your buoyancy is better, but there's so many other factors to consider with the tide.
Get so sick. You get so sick. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people get so ill. So you're battling your nausea. You're battling, a lot of other things. So.
Interesting. So, well, thank you so much. We've talked about lots of different things. I just wanted everyone to get a sense of all the things that you do to get where you want to go. It's been great to talk to you. So everybody, I'll put this up with her bio and you'll be able to see it soon. Let me just stop the recording. Wait a minute.